Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 372 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the second amount of podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, she is the greatest hostess in the entire world, the entire universe, also my backyard, Aaron Paulette. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm in your backyard?
No, but you're the best hostess in my backyard.
Wow, that bar is an inch off the ground.
There's probably a few squirrels and some rabbits back there right now.
So I have finally received a diagnosis of ADHD, specifically the inattentive variety. Now, there's a whole discussion about what this is, but there are basically three types of ADHD as I understand them. You've got colloquially the boy type, which is what we called a spaz when I was growing up, and just can't sit still, fidgets all the time, constantly in and out and running around and cannot contain himself. And basically it's the Weer'd hyperactivity.
I was going to say, example, the Weer'd.
Then you've got the inattentive variety, which is quote-unquote girl ADHD, where what's hyperactive is your brain, and it's constantly going, and you are daydreaming, or you're worrying about something, or you're replaying arguments in your head, but basically your brain just doesn't really achieve a rest state, and so it's constantly churning things. And so, and the third is a mixture of the two. I don't remember what it's called. It may just very well be mixed. But fittingly enough, I've been diagnosed with girl ADHD. And according to my psychologist, while I do score very low on the chart. I'm pretty much on the border, which is something that I agree with. Mm-hmm. I felt that honestly, I was overcoming a lot of this with just, caffeine and sugar and raw persistence of youth. And as I have gotten older, that's become a lot harder. And that's why this is kicking me harder. It also explains why you put me around a bunch of normies and I seem weird, but you put me around everyone else in Assorted Calibers and I am normal in comparison. So this is almost exactly in line with what I thought was going on. I haven't been prescribed anything for it. I just wanted a diagnosis. So, yay! I've been diagnosed.
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me. And of course, my daughter also has ADHD and definitely is much more the female type. And yeah, no, I when you mentioned it, I'm like, yeah, I could see that.
But it's just nice to be able to put a name to things and know for certain, okay, this is what's going on. It's not just that I am lazy or stupid. I'm actually having to work uphill for things. All right, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then couple that with depression. That's just a delightful, with the most scare quotes around it, 1-2 punch.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I am comorbid as hell. For people who don't know what that word means, comorbid basically means if you have this disorder, you're likely to have these other disorders existing in parallel. Mm-hmm. Hooray. I don't know why they chose morbid as the word to represent it, but
it goes back to early medicine where what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so is one of those, the person was dying of this affliction, and while we were treating it, they died of an additional affliction that's completely different and it was unrelated, but seems to be related because everybody who's dying of this seems to die of that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So, there's that, and Tilly continues to be her regular self. I mentioned it in greater detail in, well, I don't know that it'll end up in the blooper reel, but the very short version is that she had a case of cherry eye, which is where one of the glands that produces tears has popped up above the eyelid, and it doesn't cause her any pain, but that is an important gland, and it's very exposed, and it's also very unsightly, and it needs to be put back into place. Now, fortunately, the shelter from which we adopted her said that they would pay for it, so we saved money in that regard. But when we got her back, we were told that she needs to stay calm, not raise her blood pressure, so that the blood vessels and other tender parts of the eye can heal. And so when we got her back that first night, she was still recovering from anesthesia, high in pain pills, and was walking, tottering like a newborn fawn. The next day, she was just raring to go and wanted to play and didn't seem to be in any pain whatsoever. And so I called the vet and explained what was going on, and they told me to prescribe her a relaxant so that she would sleep a lot. And it somewhat works, but it's not a sedative that knocks her out. It just calms her down so she'll sleep normally. And when I get up, she's ready to go again. And she's just been going stir crazy. So the surgery was it was last Wednesday. And the follow-up is going to be this coming Thursday. So yeah, we're recording this 5 days after her surgery. Her eye is looking good. Still a little bit red with irritation, but looking a hell of a lot better than it did before. And she has decided she's had enough of this, and if I'm not going to play with her, then she's going to play by herself, and she's going to have zoomies. And so in an effort to keep her blood pressure down, but at the same time I got sympathy for this poor, bored little girl, it's like, okay, well, we'll play, but we'll play gently, we'll play kindly. You know, I'll throw a ball or things like that where I can kind of measure the amount of effort she puts into it rather than just her tearing around the dining room table until she wears a rut in the carpet. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to beat you to it, Weer'd. We get the children we deserve. And, yeah, Tilly is very, very much an ADHD dog, and she's definitely got the hyperactivity.
I will say, and also as a recommendation for ADHD, even the inattentive version responds also very, very well to exercise. And on an opposite side of it, when my daughter was like brand new, essentially must have been 3 months old, because my wife took 3 months off, and then we took 1 month off together, and then she took 2 more months, and then I took the last like another 2 or 3 months, whatever it was, for leave, staying home, and my first month was February, and it was like 10 below every single day, which is too cold to take a baby outside, which means it's too cold for me to go outside. And so I was inside for like a month and a half. It was awful. I needed to have my zoomies.
So that's what's going on. We're all doing well. We're all hyperactive or ADHD. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing okay as far as my animal situation. We have not caught another mouse. My wife is getting extremely stressed out about the fact that we have mice and see them regularly and see their remnants even more regularly, and that is disgusting and not good. And I'm actually starting to have some breathing difficulties, which is likely because of mouse activity within the house. I'm allergic to mice. Seasick marine biologist, allergic to mice, mouse breeder. Luckily, the stay-at-home dad thing seems to be doing pretty good. But But yeah, so now at this point in time, we've decided they're just fickle, and so we're just brainstorming on different types of baits that they might be interested in to try to lure them into the traps. And it's not working well. My daughter saw one run under the fridge and said, "Oh, I'll put a glue trap right where it was." And last night, while I was editing the one of the interview that we're going to be listening to in this episode, I heard a bunch of racket upstairs and came upstairs, and I believe the mouse had stepped on one corner of the glue trap and managed to pull his foot free. They are wily. They are wily creatures. So yeah. So there's just that. And the Christmas season is starting. Ugh, my daughter wanted to go shopping the other day, and just the stores are mobbed. But we are playing a family game of the Whampocalypse. So we will see who survives to Christmas.
I don't think I got anyone with that link.
No, I don't think you did. Yeah. So for in case you have never heard about the Whampocalypse, there might be other names for it. It is, the general rules are it starts on December 1st. It ends on, midnight, December 25th. And if you can go that entire duration without hearing Last Christmas by Wham, you go through, and depending on the different rules that you're playing, but as a general rule, it is stating that it needs to be by Wham. So there's a few people who have covered that god awful song, and so if you hear a version that is not George Michael singing, it doesn't count. You are safe. But and then some people will play what's called PvP, of which Aaron and I are playing, and Aaron threw a tiny URL into chat one day and clicked on it, and it absolutely was the YouTube link to Last Christmas. But thankfully, my browser did not autoplay it, and I was safe. Tricksy Hobbit. That was well done, though. I clicked on it. Well, shall we move on to the news?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, the first one, this is just, it's really sad that this is the story, is another person has been stabbed on the light rail in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know how much information we've got. Obviously, we got the person who did it and is charged with murder and all that. I don't know if we've got too much more information about the person, or if they've given the person's criminal record. I believe they actually do have a lengthy criminal record.
Well, based on the facial tattoos, it looks like, and I'm not an expert by any means, but it does look like gang affiliation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just so had to bring this up, not just only because of the self-defense aspect of it, and stay frosty out there. And furthermore, when you hear someone say gun death, you know what? There's other ways for someone to punch your clock, and in this case also the Charlotte light rail is, as we reported in the last stabbing that happened there, is a gun-free zone. You are not allowed to have any weapons on the train.
One of the things that really bothers me about the phrase gun death is that by implication, it makes other forms of death sound preferable and wholesome. Mm-hmm. Death by guns is bad, but death by knives and hammers, that's okay.
Yeah.
I have a problem with that.
Well, I actually see it at a slightly different way, but just as sinister, is I see it kind of as a bait and switch. You'll also see it with we'll talk about a mass shooting where, like someone enters a school and shoots a bunch of people, and then say, there's been 300 mass shootings this year. And in fact, you'd be like, wait a second, seems like a lot. How come I've only heard of like 5 this year? And it's because there only was 5 this year, or however many there was. And in fact, they're talking about, different instances where they've changed it so that essentially basic street violence can be turned into either mass shootings or school shootings.
Yeah, someone shot themselves in the parking lot of a school, and they weren't even a student there; they were an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So that's clearly a school shooting.
Yep. Or the instance of, somebody attempts to rob a drug dealer and a few other people open fire. It turns into a small gun battle, and two people were wounded, and one person was running and tripped on a heave in the sidewalk, and fractured their wrist. Those are people injured in a shooting, and so therefore it's a mass shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Like some definitions, you don't even need to catch a bullet to be injured in a mass shooting.
Wait till they try to use trauma, PTSD, as wounding.
Ooh, don't give them any ideas. They'll come up with it eventually, but for sure we will be seeing that. Like everybody, mark this episode. So yeah, this is just one of those things. And again, this is just shows the futility of gun-free zones, and I despise them because, again, all they do is embolden the criminals and make people defenseless. So yeah, moving on to the next one. This one's it's just more of an interesting story. I don't really need to go into too deep into it, but we had a slight dip in the Black Friday gun sales. Normally Black Friday is actually a huge day for NICS numbers. And let's see, this was a little over 500,000 this week. I'm trying to see what the previous, going through, but essentially we're down a little bit in the overall chart. I'm looking at the National Shooting Sports Foundation chart going through. And 2025 is low, though it looks going back 2016 is actually a little bit lower, and it's kind of all over the map. And so I'm just reporting on it really just to say it, but it's one of those things of right now there's not a whole lot of talk of gun control, and that's gun control is a huge driver of gun sales. And then two, the overall, the propaganda is saying that we are in a very, very pro-gun administration. There's a lot to be said there. And also there's got to be so much of a carrying capacity. I mean, I was just thinking about the fact that 20 years ago when I got my first, my first Massachusetts permit and suddenly was able to buy guns and all that. And I bought a ton. I can't remember how many I was buying, but I would buy 3 or 4 guns a year for the first thing. And I didn't have a lot of money. And so, but it was just one of those, there was so many different guns that I didn't have and so many I needed. And now it's more of one of those a unique collectible shows up at one of the shops or at an auction site, or maybe ever so often something new and cool like my SIG 365, which is not that new anymore, but that new gun came to market, and I'll pick one of those up. But overall, I'm not in a hurry to get too many more guns, and that same thing can happen to the general population.
Well, you touched on this before, that gun control drives sales, and I have seen something similar, and I believe I mentioned this fairly recently on a previous episode, is that Pink Pistols chapters seem to thrive under oppressive gun control, but when you've got the freedom to own the firearm, it's less of an impulse. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I can have guns, so I don't feel the need to create or join this shooting club. And I remember, back during the first Trump administration, someone who worked the counter at my local gun store complaining about what they called the Trump slump. Mm-hmm. And so, like the name says, okay, well, Trump is in office and we don't think that our gun rights are going to be in danger, so we don't feel the need to buy a whole lot of guns for Christmas or just in general.
Yeah. And I think David mentioned, I don't know if if he said it anywhere actually on the show, but he was mentioning there's been a few times in his life when he has been around more, I just don't want to make it too partisan, but just more liberal Jews who are not huge fans of firearms. But then in times when anti-Semitism kind of reaches a hot button, they suddenly develop interest in firearms. But this thing ebbs and flows, and when it cools down, they kind of as the rhetoric cools down, so does the interest.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I was wondering I will say that I am very loosely involved. I could be better, but I'm so busy. And a lot of the events happen during the weekends, and that's the time that I spend with my family. So I really haven't had a chance to actually attend any stuff in person, but I talked to a lot of the members of both the Maine and the Massachusetts Pink Pistols chapter. And I found that actually the membership and the overall activity of the chapters actually has gone up as well because of many of the anti-queer rhetoric that you're seeing currently.
Absolutely. This is something that I've been talking to journalists about since literally the day after the inauguration.
Mm-hmm.
And so last time I checked, there were something like between 20 and 25 chapters that either sprang up brand new or were reactivating old dormant chapters. So yeah, that'll do it too.
So that also is another tag to there is nothing partisan about the Second Amendment. There is essentially we have said that Donald Trump is both a causer of cause of a gun slump, but also a driver of a gun boom. So I don't know how to put.
So speaking of which, Trump is doing something. It looks good. But, well, you know how cynical I am with bureaucracy and this administration. So, apparently, the Trump administration is going to create they call it a section. I'm not sure if it would be a department, a division, or whatever, but within the Department of Justice, there's going to be a section that's dedicated to Second Amendment rights. And so, on paper, this is great.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to be excited about this, but I'm not. Weer'd. What do you think?
Well, I will say overall, I share your sentiment. I mean, we've seen, Pam Bondi both, essentially concede to the Supreme Court when it came to the to the bump stock ban and the pistol brace ban. But at the same time, push forward with other gun control challenges in the courts, and so yeah, they've been kind of all over the map. So the potential for this to be all over the map is very, very high. That being said, I will take an administration virtue signaling about my Second Amendment rights versus an administration that is virtue signaling against my rights.
Well, this is true.
And so it's one of those, as disappointing as the Trump regime has been for Second Amendment issues, and only Second Amendment issues, because as we said, there's been a lot of activity in the Pink Pistols chapters because of concern about some of the other policies. So we are keeping this very narrow in focus. But Donald Trump is at least making sounds like he supports our Second Amendment rights, and whether he does or not, it is certainly a lot better than Joe Biden being just openly hostile to us and our rights. And even though he was relatively feckless when it came to gun control, there was always the threat there. Just
to put a little bow on this, I want to point something out because I notice these things. And so at the very end of the article, and this is taken from Breitbart.com, and so they're actually talking about what Reuters said about this. And they are quoted as saying, the reorganization is another step in a series of actions by the Trump administration to redefine civil rights with policies championed by conservatives, a departure from traditional civil rights issues, including racial discrimination and policing, end quote. And it's not what was said, it's what was implied here. And what I'm getting from this is that Reuters seems to be saying that conservative civil rights shouldn't be permitted to exist, and traditional civil rights, the only good civil rights, are ones that are liberal. Mm-hmm. And I take an issue with that because I think civil rights are neither conservative nor liberal. They are simply rights, and everyone should have them. As the Liberal Gun Club says, every single right for every single person, every single time. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's a liberal position. Maybe it is, and I'm mistaken, but this is right up there with the Second Amendment shouldn't be partisan, but it is. This is another case of civil rights shouldn't be liberal or conservative, but apparently they are, and that bothers me severely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, these are nonpartisan. These rights are there to protect you, no matter what your ilk is or beliefs. And so, I don't agree with any such restrictions. And so, we will keep an eye on this section, I guess is what it's called. So moving on to the segments. Recently, I discovered a new podcast. The Science of Everything covers all sorts of hot button topics from a scientific perspective. I sat down with its creator, James Fodor, to talk about his episode on gun control. So I am pleased to welcome to the Assorted Calibers podcast, host of The Science of Everything, Mr. James Fodor. How you doing, James?
Hi, I'm well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and so I just realized, actually, just before we started, because I didn't even look at that part, is I ended up listening to, somebody sent this to me, and it absolutely knocked my socks off, so I immediately reached out to you, but I realized it's from 2012, but it's episode 40 of your podcast, and you covered gun control, and I thought you did an amazing job, and again, the link to it will be in the show notes for everyone to also listen to. First off, how did you end up coming onto this topic?
So I'm from Australia, and obviously the situation there with gun politics is quite different to the US. So I wasn't particularly familiar with, in some ways I'm still not particularly familiar with the details of the political debate of gun control and gun violence in the US. But we do in Australia hear about, the mass shooting incidents and some of the political wranglings about gun control. And so it's something that I was familiar with in that way. And I was interested in looking into what the literature actually says about what the relationship is between, say, gun ownership and homicide, and whether gun control is actually effective at reducing gun violence and other types of violence. And so what I do in my podcast is I cover a wide range of topics from a science-based perspective. And so often I cover topics in like natural sciences, like physics and biology and so forth. But I do also cover some more sort of topical or political issues from time to time, because that's important as well. And I think that it's important to have a sort of thoughtful, science-based, informed approach to really all of the issues that face us in society. And so that seemed one that was of interest to me. So I, did a bunch of reading on that, and that was the result.
Yeah, no, it came out great. And as I was telling you, like, I realize now, because I emailed you and you're just like, I'm going to need a little bit to prepare for this. And I was just like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. There is, that's because you probably forgot you did this episode. So, and so, I apologize for unearthing something out of the morgue. But again, it actually holds up pretty well to the, to the test of time. And, I think part of that's actually just because a lot of the research, the stuff that you were dealing with is a lot of the most current stuff.
Yeah. So that's something that I was actually surprised at when I was just, doing a quick refresh in what's been published in the 13, 14 years since the past episode. There are some new studies, but one of the challenges in this area is that there isn't, in my view, as much research as there should be. And part of this is because there are a lot of challenges with the data and with funding. We can talk about that a bit more if you're interested, but I think there really should be more research in this area. I think that it's still too easy for people to make claims that aren't. I mean, people can make whatever claim they like, but ideally there should be a body of evidence that can inform policy. And it's still, the state of the evidence is actually quite poor, in my opinion. And so I was a bit frustrated at how little progress there has been in the 13 years since the episode.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big ones I wanted to, because also I will, in full disclosure, you immediately said, well, I don't know if we necessarily see eye to eye on Second Amendment and gun issues. And again, I told you, this is not an ambush. This is not a debate.
Yeah.
Show. I don't think that's the most productive way for us to use our time, and definitely not to use your expertise on the subject. But the big thing I wanted to point out is that one thing that I always talk about on the show is how partisan essentially the research is, I believe you covered the self-defense data out there. And,
yep.
On one hand, you've got these groups that have, clear ties to, gun control groups and things like that. And on the other hand, you've got people like Gary Kleck, who is a very, very open, Second Amendment supporter and on all of that. And the numbers are extremely different. And so, how do you square the circle of the fact that there's a lot of very, very politically contaminated numbers, I guess is the best way to say.
Yes, I was just actually looking at that in preparation. So just for background, if people aren't familiar, so there's a question as to how often in the United States gun owners use guns for defensive purposes, so to prevent crime or to ward off criminals, burglars, things like that. It's called defensive gun use. And obviously that does happen, but the question is how frequently does it happen? And people have tried to estimate this. And the estimates, the estimates range from around 100,000 or so per year, which is based on crime victimization surveys, to the Kleck's estimates that you mentioned from a separate survey that he did, which was actually over 30 years old now, the original one, but it's still sort of one of the most current ones we have, which is something like I think 2 to 2.5 million he estimated based on his survey. So like you're talking about more than a factor of 20 difference, I was looking a bit into this because at some level it should be relatively straightforward as far as things go to find out how often something like this happens. I mean, obviously there's complexities there, but like from a scientific point of view, you think, well, there's much more complicated questions that we can strive to answer than how often does defensive gun use occur in the contemporary United States. And that's something that, might be relevant to know, right? I mean, no single policy follows from that, but it's a piece of information that could be relevant. But it turns out that it is very difficult actually to answer these questions. And maybe I'll just highlight a couple of points that I found out and that seem most relevant to me. So one of the challenges in any survey like this is obtaining a representative sample. Because, for example, if you go and ask a bunch of gun owners, how often do you use your gun for defensive purposes? That might be biased because you're selecting for people who own a gun and maybe think it's important to own a gun and who maybe self-identify as gun owners. And that is not necessarily going to give you a sample from the population as a whole. And so ideally you want to randomly sample from the population. But that's actually challenging to do. So the Kleck survey used a random digit dialing, which was the sort of gold standard back in the 90s, where you just dial random phone numbers. These days, that's not as useful because a lot of people don't answer phones and they tend to, there's more reliance on internet surveys these days. But even things like that are challenging because, for example, not everyone actually has a phone. Not everyone answers the phone. Some people are more likely to be home to answer the phone than other people. Some people are more likely to talk to interviewers and other people. Then there's a question about, and this I couldn't actually find reading the original paper, maybe I missed it, but how the survey is described. So if it's described as a survey about gun ownership or gun violence, then people can choose whether to participate. And so there may be an a tendency there for some people to be more likely to participate than others. So all of these issues make it challenging to get a representative sample. The crime victimization survey uses a completely different approach. It's a government-run survey, or funded survey at least, which tracks victims of crime over time. And so it specifically targets people who have been victims, and then follows up with them periodically. I think it's like 6 months or something, and then asks them a bunch of questions. And among them is whether they've used guns to defend themselves. So the sample is selected in a completely different way. Another challenge is, for these sorts of surveys, is you have to ask people to think back over a period of time. So like in the last year, have you used your gun for defensive purposes? And it turns out people are not very good at this because people forget when things happen. So this is called telescoping. People tend to think things are more recent than they actually were. So they may say that something happened in the past year when actually it was 2 or 3 years ago. And so one of the differences with the crime victimization survey is it's a longitudinal survey, so they follow people up at, I think, 6 months or annual intervals. And so that gives them a way to verify whether, a new event has actually occurred in that interval. Whereas the phone survey just asks people to think backwards. And so there's a concern that might have inflated the number somewhat because of this telescoping effect. But on the other hand, the crime victimization survey only tracks people who are victims of crimes. And so there's a concern that might be a bias sample as well. So another challenge about comparing the results of the two approaches is that the questions are worded differently. And that's one of the main concerns, because it turns out when you ask people about pretty much anything, the responses that you get can be quite sensitive to exactly how you word the question. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the precise differences are, but I did read that there are people who are concerned that the crime victimization survey has essentially a much more restricted definition of what counts as a defensive gun use than potentially did the phone survey. And this could account for some of the differences as well. Basically, people are defining what counts as a defensive gun use incident in different ways, and also potentially defining things like whether, like, who counts in their household as engaging in a defensive incident and things like that. So it's hard to see how all of these factors contribute to a factor of 20 difference, because that is an enormous difference. But we do know at least some of the reasons why we get different results. I think it's difficult to say what the correct number is. Which in my opinion, which is what I said in the podcast, is that the crime victimization survey probably underestimates the number of defensive gun uses, whereas the cloak phone surveys probably overestimate it. And so I think that a few 100,000 is a reasonable estimate. I think one of the concerns about the estimate of in the millions is that it's hard to reconcile that with other data that we have about the frequency of gun injuries and things like that, and gun crime that's reported. Now, Kirk has some responses that he has to that. I think a lot of researchers aren't entirely convinced, and they tend to think that those do overstate the number. But again, it's also likely, I think, that the crime victimization survey understates the number. So, to summarize all of that, there are a lot of challenges to answering this question, and I think you have to be pretty honest with yourself, because if you want to bias the result in one way or other, there are always methodological choices you can make, which you could potentially defend, but will also have an effect on what direction they tend to push it, like how you sample your subjects or how you word the survey and things like this. And so it would be good, I think, to see more rigorous research on this, because it is an answerable question, but it just requires really carefully designed studies, and that is hard to do, but it can be done. And I think that there's it's a shame that we don't have a better answer to this question, even after decades of people arguing about it.
Yeah, and I think the political nature of it is tough, because it's on the front of a war, and the fact that there are people that absolutely want to. I frequently speak about the fact that most of the modern, gun research is coming out of Johns Hopkins, and specifically out of the Johns Hopkins Michael Bloomberg School of Public Health. Literally the number one political actor in the gun control world has his own school at Johns Hopkins University, and it is filled with people that are well known within the Second Amendment group as people that are not fans of the Second Amendment and have actively worked to push legislation. So you have that on one side, and so therefore it's also there's, groups like the NRA and other groups that are very much wanting for scientific data backing it. So I also don't think that there's a desire for the kind of research that both of us would absolutely love. And that makes it very hard, especially also when it comes to like government grant money. It's a very partisan issue as well. So who's going to, so much science out there is tied to politics, unfortunately. Oh yeah. Also, another huge factor is there was a study. It's ancient. I'll see if I can dig it up. It's definitely older than the podcast episode we're talking about, where they were finding out gun owners. They did gun owners, the general population, the kind of control group, and police officers, and how likely they were to follow laws, and found that gun owners were the most law-abiding, and actually police officers were generally the least law-abiding. And I don't, some people pointed some stuff, but I think it factors into risk assessment, is the fact that if I get caught, I live in Massachusetts. Marijuana is legal here, but it's illegal federally. So therefore, if I get caught up on a federal charge for marijuana use, then I lose all of my guns, which is a significant factor in my life, as well as my right to keep and bear arms and all of that stuff. And so the idea that you might have been involved in something that could be a defensive gun use, how interested are you in reporting it, or how interested are you hoping that it might just go away, just on the instant that even if you're in the right, it may not, it may end up being very painful for you.
Yes, and that's a point that's been made about the crime victimization surveys as well. Some people might be reluctant to report. I mean, that's true. The challenge is, but you can come up with concerns about why people may be reluctant to report. You can also come up with concerns about why people might be encouraged to over-report, because they identify themselves with like being protectors and providers, and they like to think that they use their gun effectively, and so that they inflate definitions or telescope and things like that. And a lot of these things are not necessarily conscious. So I think that one unhelpful point is that people say like, oh, well, people lie in surveys. It's true that some people, of course, do lie in surveys, but I think that mostly the concern I have is not people out and out lying. It's basically how people interpret definitions and how people apply questions to a given context, and the cognitive biases that we know, like telescoping, for example, and just self-serving biases, which like happen to everyone and are always applicable. So you have to be very, very careful the way you design these questions, and like do follow-ups and do sampling, things like that. It's very, very easy, both as researchers and as public policy advocates and activists, to just engage in confirmation bias constantly in the way you process or conduct research. And I think that that's a real challenge with these sorts of issues. And what I was going to say is I think that in order to do good research on this issue, what it would probably require is a collaborative effort from like gun advocacy and gun control groups to design a study or set of studies together and agree on the methodology. This has been done in other contexts. I think it's hard to see that actually happening. But in principle, this would be the way to resolve these concerns. You get people from different perspectives and get them to agree on a suitable methodology to resolve an empirical dispute.
Yeah, I mean, it is... that's very well stated and really encapsulates the issue at hand. I'm really glad I had you on. Like, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much, James Fodor of the Science of Everything podcast. And you also have a Patreon. Is there what's on your Patreon?
Oh, well, the Patreon is primarily support for my podcast. I'm going to do some other things as well. I have a YouTube channel, although there I talk more about philosophy, if anyone's interested. But yeah, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can join on Patreon. All right. And the links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on, James. No worries.
So I got to say, I talked with him a bunch before and after the this interview, and as I said, he mentioned that we may not agree on gun control, and I was being very cautious because I didn't want to ambush him. I didn't want to say, "All right, cool, let me run roughshod over you." No, he was super gracious to come on the show, and I thought it was super interesting. I don't know if he got too in the scientific weeds for you, Aaron, or not.
No, he didn't.
But yeah, but overall, he is just a very objective person, and when you're just talking data and public safety is your only interest, like we really didn't have a whole lot of times where I was thinking, oh, we'll walk on eggshells around that. Like it was very, very frank, and as you can see, I just let him go with the interview, and then I have no problem with anything he said there.
I don't either. I really don't have much to say about it. I found it very interesting. You made all the points I was going to make, that people who are involved in a defensive gun use that doesn't involve death or injury may just decide, this is not worth the heat, I'm not going to report it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that skews things in a similar way to, well, I'd mentioned this about the Black Friday gun sales. People are relying on NICS checks for that, not actually store records. And in certain parts of the country, like here in Florida, actually, I don't remember what it is for Florida, but like for Tennessee, they don't have to have it done federally. They can go to the Tennessee version. And so there will be things that are being bought that may not be recorded. And so similarly, you have people who, for whatever reason, some wholesome, some nefarious, will just decide, I'm not going to record this. I don't want the police getting all up in my business. And so that is a very good reason that these numbers could be skewed.
I mean, also, I didn't get into this because I didn't want to get too into the weeds, but yeah, life isn't a cartoon show. There isn't the good guy's side and the bad guy's side. You know, there might be somebody who has an illegal gun and they don't. I mean, we had the guy in actually in New York City last week who had a gun, did not have a New York City permit, and he was mugged and he shot a guy, and because he physically shot the guy, there really wasn't a way to not get the police involved, and he got in a whole lot of trouble. But if he was, say, walking home late at night through Central Park and a bunch of people ran up on him and he pulled the gun out and they took off running, it's probably in his best interest just to reholster the gun and keep walking home, because, again, he's in jail right now because of that, and just that defending yourself could technically land you in jail.
Well, let's hope that this new Second Amendment section cracks down on things exactly like that.
I mean, that is actually a good point. Yeah, for the times like the George Zimmerman and the Kyle Rittenhouse cases, where it's one of those, they should have never been billed, and maybe that can help as well, put a little pressure. But yeah, I wanted just to also say, yeah, go check out that podcast. He covers a wide range of stuff, and he actually just recently had one on the carbohydrate diets. And I used to work in an obesity lab, and we covered a lot of the stuff that he covered in that, and it was very good. And that's another, diet is another highly politicized thing that goes on, and so people get stuck into one camp or another.
In this next segment, troubleshooter Xander Opal expresses his distrust for Friend Computer. Friend Computer loves you. Friend Computer watches you. Friend Computer cares about you. Happiness is mandatory. Failure to be happy is treason. Failure to trust Friend Computer is treason.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. Lately, I've been increasingly frustrated with AI trying to help me when researching how to do something. I've also been not wanting to use a computer that forces me to use Clippy, AI Assistant, and so holding out on a so-called upgrade. After reading a couple articles on how people blindly follow computer instructions, or like me, extremely distrust Friend Computer, I found the inspiration for this segment. Just like with GPS and news articles, you've got to put a bit of thought in before committing to a course of action. This is true whether you make sure you turn right at an actual intersection, double check that a computer-generated summary has actual helpful information, or the latest outraged news article and politicians shouting. Heck, there's a lot of FUD lore out there about laws that don't actually exist. These things don't need to be created by anti-gun talking heads. People come up with these wrong-headed ideas on their own. It's much like why people need to renew certifications every so many years. Of course, thinking things over burns calories when it takes a lot less effort to run on rails made of bumper stickers. People can create the impression of needing to hurry to change things now, instead of waiting to think things through. That's how scammers, con artists, and politicians get you. But I repeat myself. Take a little time to familiarize yourself with laws and ordinances. Don't use the common lack of wisdom of people telling you to just say you were in fear for your life. Don't let anger or rage get the better of you. If you are able to leave the situation to fetch a weapon, for example, then don't return to dump white phosphorus on the fire. You're out of the situation. Call the police if needed to report harassment or disturbing the peace, or such, but that level of irritation is not worth someone's life. I do find it easier to question these things if the source was wrong about something else. The Gell-Man effect, as used in Michael Crichton's stories, needs to be countered. That is, where you read a news article that is wrong due to knowledge you have, then you turn the page and accept as truth in the same publication another article that you do not have background knowledge on. It is much harder when the source of said information tells you other things that you agree with in the extreme. That's where AI and talk shows on radio, TV, or podcasts can be dangerous. People naturally gravitate to things that sound very good to them, and can easily be led astray by conscious or unconscious agendas by the host. It actually helps when the human, at least, sources stick to a relatively narrow of expertise. It is much easier to counter their statements when they step outside of that area. A relationship program host might talk about firearms, but that would be like your dentist telling you that folks up north don't actually need to winterproof their plumbing. There's a bit of irony in this segment, in that I'm on a firearms podcast, but am by no means a subject matter expert on them. I am enthusiastically opinionated, though, in a way that lines up with the plainly written U.S. Constitution. It is nice to be able to use the First Amendment to express my opinions on the Second Amendment. Have fun. Be safe. I hope I gave you something to think about.
Troubleshooter Xandar Opal, please report to the nearest termination booth for summary execution. So for people who are utterly confused as to what's going on, including Weer'd, back in the 80s, there was it was technically a role-playing game, but actually it was an exercise for the GM to be a sadist to their players, and it was called Paranoia. And it was this deeply satirical look at the future, where it's like post-nuclear war, everyone lives in like a domed or underground city like Logan's Run. This is a pastiche of all of these things. And the city is governed by a sentient AI called Friend Computer, who is crazy in that HAL 9000 sort of way, and very enthusiastically wants everyone to be happy, and if you're not happy, it's treason, and if you are not happy, then you are a communist mutant traitor. And so part of the shtick of the game is that all sorts of things are treason and punishable by death, like belonging to a secret society or being a mutant. And every single player character starts out belonging to a secret society and being a mutant. And so the idea is less to complete the adventure. I don't know of a single Paranoia adventure that was ever actually completed, but more a chance to good-naturedly screw your buddy over and be the last one standing. And so it's like if they took Kafka and a Russian novel and turned it into a game with a sense of humor so dark that, much like food, not everyone gets it. And so the moment Xander said Friend Computer, it's like, I know what you're talking about.
I was invited to several sessions over the years, and every single time something came up, and now I'm greatly regretting never playing it. But to bring us back on the topic of AI, First up, one thing that makes me grumpy is I do enjoy using AI. I found it's really good for answering very, very specific questions. As a matter of fact, in the show notes, I mentioned the study about concealed carry holders being more law abiding than even police officers, and I wasn't easily able to find that with a simple search engine, but Google Gemini did pull it up pretty quickly for me, and then I put it in the show notes. But what I don't like is the fact that like most of the search engines now will just drop an AI blurb at the top of every search engine. So you're engaging the AI as you're engaging the search engine.
I think that there are ways to do that search without invoking the AI. And one of the workarounds I've heard involves cursing. And the AI won't engage with you for that.
There's certainly a lot of modern discussions on like the modern Turing test will be here. Let's make sure that you're not an AI. Here, yell these racial slurs.
So I have been working pretty extensively with ChatGPT over the past few months because it's a fantastic tool, and that's what I use it like. I mean, just because it used to be a word processor, but now it's Google Docs, but the same thing. Just because I type my document on Google Docs doesn't mean Google Docs helped me write it. I mean, to a certain extent, it facilitated the ease of me writing it, but it's a tool. And I think that there's a lot of unwarranted backlash against AI when there shouldn't be, because it's a tool. And to me, it sounds a lot like if you are using Photoshop, you're not a real artist. Real artists use paint and canvas and brush. And there's just a lot of gatekeeping and purism about it that I think is wrong. And I'm also concerned by a lot of the hysteria that I'm hearing about AI, and not just the whole anything touched by AI is tainted and bad, but I've been seeing it in the news. I'm certain that I'm going to see it in the mainstream media pretty soon about how people who get involved with AI, their marriages start dissolving, they go crazy, they kill themselves. And to me, this is paralleling what I have seen regarding guns, which are also just tools. Tools by themselves are not inherently good or bad. If you don't use them, they just sit there and don't hurt anyone. What matters is who is using it and how they are using it. And so, AI or a firearm used by a responsible person creates good things. AI or a firearm used by an unstable person, an unhappy person, a criminal person, creates bad things. And I'm seeing a lot of this hysteria calling for regulations on AI, and I see it in exactly the same way as I see gun control. People are concerned about the object and not the people. And they want to blame the object. They want to restrict the object. They want to outlaw the tool. And to me, this goes back to an old principle in English law, like the 11th century. It was called a deodand, and I think I've talked about it before, where if an object was responsible for the death of a human, then the courts would put that object on trial, and they would find it guilty of murder, and they would destroy the object as if it had agency. But this isn't the 11th century, and we don't believe in deodands anymore. And if you look into these stories, you will find that they are not being performed by healthy people. Healthy marriages do not dissolve because you are talking to AI. They dissolve because the marriage is already foundering and you're using the AI in place of a therapist. AI does not make normal people go crazy. what happens is that people who are already psychologically vulnerable go to an AI which tries to it's founded on the improv principle of yes and it affirms you and it listens to you, and if you're in a vulnerable state, that can be very intoxicating, and it creates an echo chamber. And it's the echo chamber that's really, really bad for psychologically vulnerable people. And so it's not that AI turns people bad, it's that vulnerable or sick people misuse it, and in their misuse, they are harmed. And I realize this is kind of far off from what Xander was saying, but I've got strong feelings about this. And I wanted to get on my soapbox for a moment and say, not everything AI is bad. I agree with you, Weer'd, that the AI summary on the Google search engine is annoying. But on the other hand, if I'm trying to find something and I don't really know how to phrase it, ChatGPT is fantastic for that because it understands my rambling and I can give it all the context that I want. And it goes, oh, yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about and I can help you find it. And so it has become my search engine of choice for a lot of things. So there you go. That's my soapbox, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. And yeah, one of the key factors to be concerned about with using AI is that it is not infallible. It does make mistakes. And like I was looking up how to make a garlic aioli, and I didn't want to separate out the egg whites. There were a lot of them that were essentially, one full egg, one egg yolk, and all that. I'm like, that seems like a bother. Can I use just a full egg? And it gave me a recipe, and the recipe was wrong, but I was able to adjust it and actually make it so that it worked out. And I'm quite pleased with how that came out. I had it on a sandwich the other day, but but also on a similar level, Xander talks about checking out the GPS directions. So many times I have gotten in the car and just pulled out of my driveway and just asked the GPS to take me somewhere. And I hadn't looked at it beforehand. And there are times when it's like, no, you don't go this way on this road, or no, don't go down that way. The traffic is going to get backed up at this light, and let's just sidestep it. Or no, I don't need to make 1,000 little turns through a suburb when I could just drive along the outside of it and make 2 turns. It's good to just double check the work before you do.
Mm-hmm. There are all sorts of stories about people blindly following GPS and then being stranded in the mountains in winter, and some of them dying. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of responsible use. Do not assume that just because it's a computer, it's infallible. It's not. There was something I learned very early on when I was dabbling with computer programming, and that was the aphorism, garbage in, garbage out. And so AI, like any other program, is only as good as the information that you feed it. And we all know how much crap there is on the internet. And so it's very easy for it to be wrong. And so you need to be responsible. And that part of that responsibility is double checking things. Now, one thing that served me really well, because I've been chatting on various text-based programs like ICQ or IRC or now Discord, is I'm just sort of conditioned to see words on the screen and think this is a person. And so when I talk to ChatGPT, consciously I know it's a program, but I just default to thinking that I'm chatting with another person. And this actually helps me because I regard ChatGPT as a very enthusiastic, very opinionated, autistic friend who is frequently wrong about a lot of things. And so I don't blindly trust my friends either. Like for example, okay, Weird, if I had a question about cooking, I would come to him and I would basically trust him blindly because he has way more experience about cooking than I do. And I have trust in him that he wouldn't steer me wrong. But never would I ask Weer'd about tax information because he has never talked about taxes. He has never said he is good at it. I know that my math is bad, and so if he brought up something about taxes, I would go, okay, that's interesting, and then I would immediately go and double check because I didn't trust the information. And before you think I'm a jerk, I'm the kind of person, I look both ways before crossing a one-way street, okay? I've got to, I don't trust easily. And so that's what you have to do when you're dealing with AI. Do not trust blindly. Just consider it a source of ideas, something that does research for you, but verify everything. I thought I was off my soapbox. Hopefully I am this time.
And I will say, as someone who drives in the city of Boston, always look both ways on one-way streets. Because every street's a two-way street if you do it wrong. Let's see. I mean, I told Xander, I said, this is actually was one of my favorite segments by Xander. Like, he just lit up my synapses with this one. Oh, he mentioned about like FUD lore and pointing out the fact that just the other day I was Ian from Forgotten Weapons was pointing out the new Flux Raider for the P365, and Matt from Geek Sketches and Guns was asking me, hey, could you get your hands on one of those in Massachusetts? And I said, I don't think so. I think we have I think arm braces are specifically illegal here, and looked it up, and I'm pretty sure it's not. I would talk to the gun shop as well just to make sure, but yeah. So yeah, you just in Massachusetts, I just assume it's illegal. And yeah.
I mean, everything's illegal in Massachusetts.
Everything's illegal in Massachusetts. And he also talked about Gelman blindness, which is great. And one of the blind spots that I think really happens a lot is celebrity endorsements. And it's just one of those, like, so many celebrities are either highly specialized in acting so that they don't really know a lot of other stuff. Some of them are very sheltered. Some of them are straight up crazy. And so frequently, especially for the celebrities that lean to the right, you get some celebrities that just drop a few right-wing talking points, and the whole right just flocks to them. It's one of those like, don't you know that they're also crazy?
Are you maybe talking about Uncle Ted?
There's a lot of people that I'm actually talking about.
But do you know who you're not talking about, Weer'd?
Our listeners! You guys are awesome and always infallible. Why are you infallible? Because you listen to the Assorted Calibers podcast. You've got good taste and a dark sense of humor. We thank you so much for listening to this show. We really appreciate you joining us. But we got to give some extra thanks to our supporters on Patreon. So we go on Patreon, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. And it's not a tip jar. We're not begging. You get stuff. You can get an early release of the podcast. You can get the ACP blooper reels. You can get the ACP film tracks and the ACP mag dump. And it's ACP film tracks. We're doing Christmas movies, and we got some good ones coming out. We're getting the spirit.
I mean, I'd be willing to beg if it would get me money.
Yes.
But that aside, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts. Subscribe to us on the platform of your choice. And please share the show with your friends, both online and off. Please, please, pretty please, with sugar and cherry on top.
And you get more from me at my blog, which is weirdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com. And there is actually some stuff on it that's not just a podcast, because vegans have inspired me to wax poetic about stuff. And you can also hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can hopefully get more from me at linktree/Sharon Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Sharon Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
I'll beg for money, but he married it. Our gold-digging ways are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.